HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Yank, the true story of a former U.S. Marine in the Irish Republican Army, by John Crawley, read by David Vries. Prologue. I moved to the bow of the Valhalla and inhaled a deep breath of sea air. The weather was mild, with no rain and good visibility. Shore lights shimmered on the dark water, and there was a gentle swell, but it wasn't bad. I had been on boats a lot during my time in the Marine Corps, but never on a shrimping trawler trying to smuggle 7 tons of weapons and ammunition across the wide Atlantic in hurricane season. An initial taste of what might lie ahead occurred when we left the harbor mouth and plowed into the first of the wild Atlantic swells. They were moderate, but the boat shuddered like a car going too fast over a speed bump. I braced myself and stood for a while longer at the bow. The lights from the American East Coast receded behind us as the ocean before us grew blacker. In 14 days or so, if everything went to plan, we would land the weapons and ammunition in Ireland. I had left Ireland some months earlier with £9,000 and instructions to build an arms network from scratch. I was returning with $250,000 worth of equipment and a boat and crew prepared to take it all the way. I had also acquired contacts and resources that would prove invaluable in the future. The first few days at sea were routine and uneventful, but then we lost our autopilot. With the autopilot functioning, the steering wheel in the pilot house could be set to a specific heading and maintain it despite strong winds and currents. But with it out of action, someone had to be at the wheel at all times to keep us on course. It was mainly Bob Anderson, John McIntyre, and myself who took turns in 4-hour shifts. About halfway across the ocean, we had a day when the sea was like glass. I never saw calmer water, not even on a fishing pond. The wake from the Valhalla caused the only ripple in the utter tranquility of the benign Atlantic. I had no idea I was experiencing the proverbial calm before the storm. That night, the winds began to build and the sea churned. Bob grew concerned. He told me that a hurricane he'd been monitoring in the Bahamas was coming up the Gulf Stream and heading in our direction. Shortly afterwards, all hell broke loose. The Valhalla wasn't designed for the battering it was about to receive. Enormous waves, 40 to 50 feet high, dwarfed the boat, while ferocious winds, driving rain, and crashing seas swept the deck. The boat reeled violently from side to side, its stabilizing outriggers almost touching the surface with each roll. Walls of cold, dark water made endless attempts to swamp us. Then an enormous wave landed an almost knockout blow to the boat. There was the sound of a massive crash, and I was thrown forward violently. It felt like a car collision. I stumbled from my berth to a chilling sight. 4 of Valhalla's 7 tempered glass windows had been blown in. Bob was on his knees with blood gushing from a head wound caused by broken glass. He was trying desperately to hold on to the wheel while John rendered him assistance. Water had poured into the pilot house and down into the forward engine room, causing a short circuit and starting a fire. Smoke poured up from the engine room where the guns and ammunition were stored. Seawater sloshed around my ankles. I knew at that moment we were doomed. Blood was everywhere, but to my immense relief, Bob was lucid and able to function. John did his best to clean and dress Bob's wounds while I took the wheel, trying to steer us into the waves so we didn't get broadsided. There was so much damage to the boat, and the storm was so fierce and persistent, I could not conceive of us evading catastrophe for much longer. I asked Bob if we should put on the survival suits we had brought along. "There's no point," he gasped painfully. "We're in the middle of the ocean. We have no communications. Nobody knows we're here. Go ahead and put it on if you want to, but it'll take you 8 hours longer to die." None of us put them on. 1. Recon. Pain is beautiful, and extreme pain is extremely beautiful. I was beginning to have my doubts about that. The U.S. Marine sergeant who assured us of this fact sprinted effortlessly beside us. A dozen young Marines who had just landed in Okinawa and volunteered for recon training were trying desperately to keep up with this loping gazelle of a man as he darted down narrow dirt tracks that took us over hill after hill after excruciating hill. Several recruits had already quit or collapsed in a pool of vomit. Despite 3 months of hard conditioning at boot camp and another month of hauling ass at advanced infantry training at Camp Pendleton, California, this physical training was off the charts. Hours earlier, I had stepped off a plane at Kadena Air Base outside Okinawa after a 24-hour flight from California via Alaska and Tokyo. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I wasn't supposed to be in the Marines. I wanted to be a Green Beret, like my cousin Ken Crawley, who had spent 7 years in that outfit. When I signed up at a U.S. Army recruiting station in Chicago, the contract certified that after basic training, I would be given an opportunity to attend jump school, ranger school, and the Special Forces Qualification Course, or Q course. There was no guarantee I would make it through this training, of course. Most didn't. But they would permit me to try. However, while I had obtained the guarantee for assignment to airborne, ranger, and special forces schools at the recruiting station, I had not yet signed the final enlistment papers when fate intervened. I had originally flown to America in April 1975 from Ireland, where I had been living for the 4 previous years. I would turn 18 in May and could then enlist in the military. After a stint with the Green Berets, I planned to return home and join the Irish Republican Army, or IRA. No one sent me or encouraged me in this endeavor. I thought that one up all by myself. While in Chicago, I stayed with my Aunt Alice and Uncle Mike. Mike Cahill was my mother's uncle. He had emigrated to America from County Kerry at 16 years of age and worked for the gas company his entire life. Aunt Alice, of German-Dutch origin, was from a farm near Pontiac, Illinois. She was a lovely woman, and our family adored her. The couple had no children and welcomed me in while I got sorted out for enlistment. Uncle Mike was drafted into the U.S. Navy during the Second World War. He fought in the Pacific Theater. He didn't talk about it much, but I remember the astonishment with which he spoke of watching Japanese kamikaze pilots slamming into American warships. Mike manned a 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft gun on a troop transport carrying Marines into battle. He was at Saipan and Peleliu. Mike had a reverence for the Marines, and his experiences with them engendered a lasting affection and respect for Leathernecks. He told me if I wanted to join the military, if I really wanted to do it right and learn from the best, the Marines were my only option. Partly out of curiosity and partly to keep Mike happy, I went to see a Marine recruiter. I told the recruiter that, although I thought the Marines were good, I wanted to go for Special Forces, and the Marines had no such unit. "Young man," he assured me, "we have the best Special Forces of all, the elite of the elite, the cream of the corps, Marine Recon." Never heard of it. No shit. Recon doesn't flaunt itself like the Green Berets or Navy SEALs. It keeps a low profile. You won't see Recon chasing after writers and Hollywood producers to glamorize it. Being a Marine is enough for them. They don't want to be portrayed as better than their fellow Marines in the infantry. These guys are quiet professionals who prefer to remain in the shadows. Swift, silent, deadly is their motto. They only accept the best. That sounded interesting and challenging. What kind of stuff do they do? Recon parachute out of planes behind enemy lines to gather intelligence and carry out ambushes and raids. You could find yourself being shot out of a submarine torpedo tube to swim to some hostile beach to carry out an amphibious reconnaissance or to conduct a maritime infiltration. They get the toughest, most challenging and dangerous missions in the Marine Corps. The recruiter could see he was pushing the right buttons. My soon-to-be 18-year-old head filled with visions of swashbuckling audacity and daring do. The recruiter leaned forward in his chair, as if sharing a secret he dare not breathe to another soul. The only thing is, to volunteer for recon, you gotta carry your balls in a wheelbarrow. That clinched it. I asked to see the guarantee I would be sent to recon training after boot camp, a contract similar to what the Army was willing to offer me. We don't do that, said the recruiter. We only guarantee you infantry. Once you're a grunt, you volunteer for recon at that point. But what if... The recruiter raised his hand to cut off the anticipated question. Recon is always looking for volunteers. Believe me, you'll have no problem being accepted for recon training. Whether you make it or not is entirely up to you. The next day, the Marine drove me over to the Army recruiting office to pick up my papers. The soldier in the office had been expecting me to sign on the dotted line. Like all recruiters, he had a quota to reach every month. He was livid. "What are you, a fucking idiot?" the soldier asked, answering his own question at the same time. I caught a glimpse of the Marine recruiter smirking beside me. "These jarheads won't guarantee you a fucking thing. Recon? You gotta be shitting me. You'll end up in the cookhouse scrubbing out garbage cans with a toothbrush." The next day I informed my cousin Ken I had joined the Marines. "What are you, a fucking idiot?" I presumed that was a popular question in the Army. "The Marines will brainwash you, John. The only tactic is to fix bayonets and hey-diddle-diddle straight up the middle. They haven't the sense to come in out of the rain. I think you fucked up." I think I fucked up, I thought as the recon instructor put us through a blistering pace. I had watched him perform 30 pull-ups back at camp, perfect pull-ups. Hands facing out on the bar and coming to a dead hang at the bottom of each repetition. No bent elbows with this guy. He wasn't jacked up and muscular like a weightlifter. He was lean and hard as nails. His was all go muscle, not show muscle. Tall, handsome, and quietly spoken, he did not spit fire and venom like the foaming-at-the-mouth drill instructors in boot camp. He politely asked you to perform a task. Either you could or you couldn't. Depending on your performance, you stayed for further training with recon or were returned to an infantry unit. We were taking part in what was known as the Recon Indoctrination Program, or RIP School. I had never heard of it and didn't know what to expect. Recon was the only unit in the Marine Corps that allowed you to quit at any time, and that carried its own psychological burden. Knowing you could leave simply by asking only added to the mental pressure and stress. Technically, Recon wasn't Special Forces, but Special Operations capable. The Marines preferred to keep Recon assets within the Marine Corps and did not want to share them with other branches of the service. Therefore, they wouldn't officially join the Special Forces community in the U.S. military command structure until 2006, when a contingent of mostly Recon Marines was renamed Marine Special Operations Command, or MARSOC. MARSOC is now an integral part of the Joint Special Operations Command. In my time, just after the end of the Vietnam War, there were two types of recon: battalion recon and force recon. The training was similar, and Marines would transfer between battalion and force regularly. Force recon, however, was considered the more elite branch, with missions that took them deeper behind enemy lines than battalion recon. Force recon had been disbanded in the 1st and 3rd Marine Divisions, leaving only the 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Later, I would volunteer for the only recon that existed in the 3rd Marine Division, the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion based at a small camp called Ona Point on the western shore of Okinawa. About halfway through boot camp at San Diego, we got a new drill instructor. He wore jump wings. I presumed he was ex-recon, though I later learned this was not the case. I worked up the courage to approach him in the squad bay. "Sir, Private Crawley, Platoon 2059 requests permission to speak to Drill Instructor Staff Sergeant Smith, sir. Speak, freak. Sir, the private was wondering how does the private volunteer for recon, sir? A recruit could only refer to himself as the private. Pronouns such as I, me, or you were strictly reserved for human beings. The drill instructor was apoplectic. You fucking scumbag! You haven't even made it through boot camp, which you won't, and you want to get into recon? It takes balls to jump out of an airplane, and you haven't got any. You got that, maggot? Sir, yes, sir. Get on your face and start pushing California further west. Sir, aye, aye, sir. Performing push-ups at his feet, I realized I would have to come up with a plan B. After that incident, the drill instructors began calling me Ricky Recon. Whenever they wanted me for something, they would call out derisively, "Ricky Recon, front and center." Because of my blunder in inquiring about recon, I was made a house mouse. A house mouse was a recruit tasked with cleaning out the drill instructor's quarters at the top of the squad bay. There were 3 house mouses. "House mouse! Why are there ghost turds under my rack?" Ghost turds are small balls of dust or fluff on the heavily waxed and buffed floor. "Sir, the private does not know, sir." "Get on your face, maggot." I was promoted to King Rat, which put me in charge of the house mouses. This was a responsibility I could have done without. Attracting the attention of drill instructors at Marine Corps boot camp is never a good idea. One day a Puerto Rican recruit named Hernandez approached the drill instructors to request an emergency phone call. Phone calls and visits were not permitted in boot camp. The only exception was in the event of the death of a close family member. "Somebody die, Private?" "Sir, no, sir. The private got a letter from his wife that she wants a divorce, and the private needs to phone her, sir." We could all hear the conversation. I was amazed that such a young kid was married. The drill instructors ordered everyone to form a circle in the middle of the squad bay. The senior drill instructor opened an olive green sea bag or duffel bag, the kind used to house and transport most of a Marine's personal belongings. He grabbed Hernandez by the back of the neck and shoved his head into the bag. "You see a wife in there, cum bubble?" "Sir, no, sir." "Everything you need is in that bag. If the Marine Corps thought you needed a wife, you'd have been issued with one." "Sir, yes, sir." "Disappear, maggot." "Sir, aye, aye, sir." Another reminder, if one were needed, that if you were looking for sympathy in the Marines, you could always find it in the dictionary, somewhere between shit and syphilis. A bizarre incident happened while I was at boot camp. I was approached by a drill instructor and told to report to an office in an administration block. That never happens to a recruit. I was dumbfounded. I could only hazard a guess that my mother or father had been killed in an accident and they were going to inform me of it there. I couldn't imagine what else it could be. Entering the office, I was met by a Marine Master Sergeant White, the highest-ranking enlisted man I had met to date. I was astonished when he shook my hand with a warm smile. "Have you ever heard of the Naval Security Group, Private?" "Sir, no, sir." The Master Sergeant invited me to sit down. He explained that I had the highest language aptitude of the 19,000 Marines who took the test as part of a battery of entrance exams. I had 3 years of Latin and 4 years of French under my belt from schooling in Ireland, so I had a good grounding in languages. He asked if I would be interested in going to the Presidio in San Francisco to attend a 50-week course in Mandarin Chinese after boot camp. I told him I had an infantry guarantee and hoped to get into recon. He replied that I was being offered the chance of a great career in the intelligence community. If I decided to leave the military, I could get a job with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, or Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. It was a no-brainer as far as he was concerned. But I had no intention after my period of enlistment of doing anything other than returning to Ireland and joining the IRA. While I neglected to mention that aspect of my projected career path, I turned down the offer. The master sergeant was disappointed in my decision, but sent me back to my platoon with a warning to say nothing of what we had discussed. When I returned, my drill instructor demanded to know what it was all about. I told him I was ordered not to speak of it. To my surprise, he dropped it. About 2 weeks later, I was woken from a deep sleep by the same drill instructor. He told me I had a phone call in his office. I thought it was some sort of trick. Recruits don't get phone calls. Slipping into my flip-flops, I warily followed the sergeant into his office wearing only my skivvies. I stood at attention and picked up the phone that lay on his desk. "Private Crawley?" "Yes, sir. This is Master Sergeant White. Would you consider learning Russian instead?" "Sir, no thank you, sir." The phone went dead. I never heard from him again. Being from Ireland sometimes caused me a problem during inspections. A loose thread is called an Irish pennant in the Marine Corps. We would cut them with nail clippers, but the eagle-eyed drill instructor still managed to find them. A typical encounter with a recruit would go something like this. "You from Ireland, maggot?" "Sir, no, sir." "Then why are you wearing an Irish pennant?" "Sir, the private does not know, sir." "Assume the position and start pushing them out." "Aye, aye, sir." Except when it came to me. I missed a tiny thread just under the pocket button on the left breast of my utility uniform. The drill instructor looked at it in horror. He glared furiously into my eyes as if I had betrayed everything and everyone he'd ever believed in. "You from Ireland, maggot?" "Sir, yes, sir." "What was that?" "Sir, yes, sir. The private lives in Dublin, Ireland, sir." "Ireland? What part of Russia is that in?" After boot camp, I was given 10 days' leave. I was one of a handful of recruits meritoriously promoted to Private First Class, PFC. I had earned my first stripe. I flew to Chicago and stayed with Uncle Mike and Aunt Alice. I then reported to Camp Pendleton, California for Advanced Infantry Training, or AIT. Boot camp was a 13-week initiation into the Corps. AIT began the real training. On my first night in the receiving barracks, I was quite sick. I think I had a touch of food poisoning. As I lay on the rack looking out of the large windows at the brilliant stars twinkling in the moonless night, I heard the booming of thunder. It seemed as if there was quite a storm brewing. Then I realized there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was my first time hearing artillery. They were carrying out a night fire mission close by. It was a sobering sound. At AIT, we were taught to move, shoot, and communicate as individuals, as part of a fire team, and as part of a squad. A Marine fire team consisted of 4 men. A squad consisted of 13 men, 3 fire teams and a squad leader. A platoon contained 3 squads and a platoon leader. Unlike boot camp, where we fired the M16 on the rifle range for qualification purposes only, we were now shooting live ammunition while conducting fire team rushes. Fully automatic fire from a shoulder weapon is of limited use. The Marines emphasize aimed fire. "Don't spray and pray," the instructors admonished. "Bullets don't go where you want, they go where you aim." We learned how to lay a base of fire while assaulting a position so other teams could frontally assault or maneuver around the enemy's flanks in what was known as an envelopment. Watching war movies, I never realized how the apparent chaos of the battlefield involved so much communication and choreography. Tactical radios and arm and hand signals play a major role in combat. Our mission, we were told, was to close with and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver or repel the enemy assault by fire and close combat. Unlike the U.S. Army, which had ceased bayonet training, we were encouraged to fix bayonets and follow up an assault with cold steel. The Marines emphasized attack and the offensive spirit far more than defense. We threw hand grenades and fired the 66mm disposable light anti-tank weapon, or LAW. We fired the M60 machine gun, the M203 grenade launcher, and the flamethrower, and detonated the Claymore mine. We learned first aid and how to navigate day and night using a map and compass. We had one easy day sitting in bleachers observing the fire and effect of various company and battalion-level support weapons, the 50 caliber Browning M2 machine gun, the 60 mm mortar, the 81 mm mortar, and the 106 mm recoilless rifle. We watched the splash of artillery rounds on hills in the distance and listened to the menacing buzz of a Cobra helicopter gunship firing its minigun and rockets. Then another unusual incident occurred. Once again, I was called out to an office to meet someone and had no idea why. When I got there, I was met by a young naval officer. He asked me if I would be willing to attend the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. He explained that I would be required to participate in a 9-month prep school, spend 4 years in the academy, and give a minimum of 6 years guaranteed service after graduation. After 2 years in the academy, I could decide whether I wanted to be commissioned as an officer in the Navy or the Marines. He was offering me the opportunity of a lifetime. It usually takes a recommendation from a state senator or a congressman to get into Annapolis. He was also asking me to sign away 10 years of my life there and then. Despite gentle prodding from the officer, I declined. I was determined to play my part in ridding Ireland of British jurisdiction and establishing a truly national republic. I couldn't do that from Annapolis. I asked again about volunteering for recon while in AIT, but was laughed at. One day, while on a forced march climbing Mount Motherfucker with a full combat load, I watched a Boeing CH-46C night helicopter pass overhead with 8 men dangling from a rope beneath it. It must have been well over 1,000 feet up. "There goes recon!" I heard an instructor shout. That scared me. I hate heights. I thought the recon men were simply clinging to the rope. I later learned that they were performing Special Patrol Insertion Extraction, or SPY, rig training. This is used for inserting or extracting teams into terrain where a helicopter cannot land, such as a jungle. The soldier or Marine wears a harness and snaps himself onto a D-ring in the rope with a carabiner or snap link. Used by Special Forces worldwide, the U.S. Marines' 1st Force Reconnaissance Company developed the technique in 1969. After AIT, I had pretty much accepted that I was never going to get into recon. No one had taken my inquiries about it seriously. I was ordered to report to the 3rd Marine Division in Okinawa, Japan. My military occupational specialty, or MOS, was 0311. I was officially a Marine rifleman, or grunt. On landing in Okinawa, we were marshaled into a room and given a lecture on Japanese customs and what to do and what not to do. We were shown a short film about Okinawa. I was given orders assigning me to the 1st Battalion, 9th Infantry Regiment, or 19. During the Vietnam War, 19 suffered the heaviest casualties of any Marine unit. They were nicknamed the Walking Dead. Buses pulled up to take us to the large Marine Corps base at Camp Hansen. As we filed out of the room, I hung back a little. The sergeant who had conducted the presentation was gathering his papers at the podium, preparing to leave. I thought, will I or won't I? Asking about recon again would probably lead to another insulting jibe. Besides, I had just been assigned to 19. I was the last man in the line waiting to file out of the reception area. Fuck it. I approached the sergeant. "Excuse me, Sergeant. I was just wondering if you know how anyone volunteers for recon." "You want to volunteer for recon?" He sounded incredulous. That made me a little uneasy. "Yes, Sergeant. Recon are looking for men. Wait here. Don't get on the bus." The sergeant went out to the buses and asked if anyone else was interested in trying out for recon. He returned with 3 men. I was ushered into an office off the reception area where a captain interviewed me. He had my military records in front of him. "Why do you want to volunteer for recon?" "I'm told they're an outstanding unit, sir. I look forward to the challenge." "All Marine units are outstanding units, Private." "Yes, sir." "Do you have a first-class PFT?" To be considered for recon, you had to have a first-class physical fitness test. Luckily for me, I did. To score a perfect 300 on the PFT, you have to perform 20 dead hang pull-ups, 80 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and a 3-mile run in 18 minutes or less.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?